Good afternoon and welcome to the Holt Public Town Hall meeting for Holt Public Families. This is a moderated town hall session, and as such, all participants will remain on mute and participant video will be off. The only video and voices you will hear will come from the panel and our moderator, the amazing Christine Lopez. In the end, this moderated town hall is scheduled to be no longer than 90 minutes long. As a result, we will save approximately 5 minutes at the end to close our time together. Most unanswered questions will eventually be answered and placed on a frequently asked questions section of our website. This morning, our session ended in approximately 75 minutes. To that end, we have an additional 8 or 9 questions that we'll be responding to this evening. We acknowledge that this has not been a typical summer for students, families, and staff to recharge, reflect, and relax. The amount of information and potential and misinformation, as well as the fluid nature of this unprecedented situation, may be contributing to the level of anxiety of our stakeholders. We care for you and long for the day when we can be together. As I reflect on the past 5 months relating to the death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Rayshard Brooks, and many, many others, as well as the subsequent demonstrations across the nation, I continue to worry about the well-being of our learning community in the absence of the opportunity to reach out and physically support one another. In a typical year, we would be able to process these events in our classrooms, in our schools, and in our learning community. Unfortunately, due to the need to social distance, we are unable to be together. Over the past 5 years, I've written about civility several times. Civility is defined as courtesy, politeness, and/or polite action and expression. Though we may have differing opinions, a level of civility, mutual regard, and support for one another will lead us to shared objectives. Regardless of the environment, we need to come together and take care of our community the best we possibly can. We need to create space for people to grieve the loss of human lives. We need to continue to combat racism by using our voices in productive and civil ways. The hardships and pain are intense. We need to find peace by talking to one another with empathy and compassion. Holt Public will continue to work on and prioritize equity and justice initiatives moving forward. We deeply care for and appreciate the staff, students, and families we serve. While we're not able to embrace or process these difficult times in person, I hope you'll find ways to help a neighbor, community member, or stranger. Moving forward, we are here for you. Our Holt Equity and Access team is more active than I've ever seen it. We hope you would like to get involved with our Holt Equity and Access team, and if you have interest, let me know and I will connect you. As you've heard me say for years, we are better together. As you can see, we've been busy. Over the summer, Holt Public contributed to the Regional Return to Learn Task Force called Education Reimagined, as well as the Governor's Return to School Guidelines. On July 27th, the Board of Education accepted our recommendation to begin the year remotely. That will include the distribution of Chromebooks and paper learning packets. I would like to acknowledge that this decision affects everyone. In some cases, it brings a level of relief, and in other cases, it creates a great deal of hardships. We understand that online instruction did not work for everyone this past spring. Our staff will be attending professional development in August in preparation for the new school year. Teachers will work a 7-hour workday. Teachers will have access to the building and are expected to report on site on a weekly basis. Moving forward, each school district across the state is required to have a return to school plan on file with the state of Michigan. Plans must be submitted to the intermediate school district no later than August 15th. Each return to school plan must be approved by the local Board of Education. To that end, we are currently accepting feedback on our return to school plan, and we will be presenting the finalized plan to our Board of Education for approval on August 10th. Now, since March 13th, our maintenance and custodial teams have been hard working to clean, fix, paint, mow, and mend our facilities. While we do not know exactly when we will begin to return to face-to-face instruction, we will have some defined criteria to guide our reopening plan. With that, we've already purchased the following to ensure our buildings are ready. The amount and type of personal protection equipment may vary by level. However, we have purchased face masks, face shields, sanitizing guns with spray, hand sanitizer, tape for directional arrows in hallways, signage for walls, walkways, bathrooms to serve as reminders, banners for directions and reminders at front doors, water fountain remediation. We intend to close old fountains and open at least one water bottle filling station in each building. High velocity fans to move the air in buildings. We're working to make sure our windows are functioning properly and our HVAC systems are able to move air as they are set up to do so. We have purchased desk shields for each student, shields for administrative assistants, additional garbage cans for hallways to gather meals and other rubbish, disinfectant spray and paper towel, gloves for each classroom, and thermometers. Finally, we have assembled a community task force to help us ensure our return to learn plan and remote guidelines are comprehensive and understandable. Since June, this group has been meeting weekly to help Holt Public be the best we can be. Moving forward, this group will help with potential budget cuts if necessary and help prioritize projects for a potential bond initiative in the spring. We would like you to know that remote learning this fall will not be like it was last spring. In the spring, our families and students appreciated our efforts under the extreme circumstances. Moving forward, our families and students have indicated that they do not want the same lived experience. They desire a more engaging live experience. Online learning must look and feel different. There will be a high level of expectations for all. Our faculty are expected to hold live instruction sections and engage with students and families at the highest level. The stakes are high and we are preparing to meet the challenge. To that end, our town hall panel includes Special Education Director Melissa Stewart, Community Education and Midway Early Learning Center Principal Heather Crandall, Director of Human Resources and Talent Management Peter Tresice, the Executive Director of Curriculum and Staff Development Steve Netzel, Athletic Director Renee Sadler, and myself, Superintendent David Hornack. While a few of our team were not able to be here with us this evening, the rest of us look forward to our time together with you today. Again, this hour-and-a-half session will be moderated by the amazing Christine Lopez, and she will continue to ask questions of the panel until just before the end of our time together. And at that point, we will be surveying you in real time with a one-question survey. So with that, Mrs. Lopez, here we go.
Here we go. I'm happy to be with all of you this evening and hope that you're all doing well and healthy. And we're going to start the first question and send that to Steve Netzel. Will remote learning instruction be more robust than it was in the spring? And can you tell us what the schedule will look like for a typical day?
Thank you, Ms. Lopez, and good evening to our community. Yes, I would like to share a response with you, and I know Dr. Hornack touched upon some of those approaches that we're taking as a district to make the experience much more robust. So the answer is yes. And these are some of the things that I'd like to share with you that as a district we have identified to work on. So in the spring, we had a short window, as Dr. Hornack mentioned, to respond to the need to provide remote learning. And at that time, we did the best we could in the moment. From our experience in the spring and feedback from all different stakeholders, it has been acknowledged and we all have been committed to make it much more robust. The remote guidelines that the district developed are intended to provide clarity on expected curriculum, instruction, assessment, and grading. Teachers will work a 7-hour workday. Teachers will have access to the building and are expected to report on site on a weekly basis. We will be providing extensive PD prior to the first day of school. Within our remote guidelines, we have laid out very specific expectations for all our learning community members. In order to maintain as much clarity as possible, staff will post a weekly schedule. Within this weekly schedule, students, parents will be able to see when live instruction is being offered, and that is required every week, access to recorded lessons, which is an expectation, office hours, what standards are being taught, as well as the various approaches that our staff will be assessing students and checking for understanding. We have identified a suggested amount of time based on developmental levels. The suggested average daily time is a total for the structured learning experience. Here are some examples. For instance, TK through second grade, 2 to 3 hours. Third through sixth grade, 3 to 4 hours. 7th through 8th grade, 4 to 5 hours. 9th through 12th grade, 5 hours. This is taking into account independent work, electives, all the different components that go into a student's day when they're in the building. Exams will be given 7-12, and the content will reflect the targets that are taught. K-6 teachers will mark report cards based on multiple data points and reflecting the level of proficiency of your child's performance. With all of this, we do need to acknowledge flexibility and are asking staff to communicate often and frequent with students and families within their own learning community to assure we're meeting the needs of our students.
Thank you, Mr. Netzel, for that. Our next question, we're going to throw it to Dr. Hornak. What process will you use to reevaluate when we return to face-to-face instruction, and how much prep time will be given to staff and students and their families before we convert back to face-to-face instruction?
Thank you, Mrs. Lopez. Excuse me. While the Holt Board of Education voted unanimously to start the school year remotely on Monday, a subcommittee, including members of the Holt Education Association, the administrative team, and the Board of Education plan to create some specific guidelines in which we will be using to determine when we should consider returning to face-to-face instruction. To that end, we will continue to partner with our local health department. We will monitor the local health department dashboards in both Ingham and Eaton counties. The best plan would include specific criteria and a strategic transition timeline. Now, with all of that, our buildings will be ready to return whenever that may happen, and they will have the appropriate PPE laid out accordingly, which will include signage, as you heard me say, tape on the floor, and desk shields, masks, face shields, sanitizer, and on and on and on. Ultimately, the language we settle on will be included in our return to learn plan, which will be presented to the Board of Education on the 10th of August. So at this point, we're still working on those guidelines, but they're starting to crystallize, and they should crystallize as early as next week.
Sounds great, thank you. Our next question is going to Renee Sadler. Will Holt High School be participating in fall sports? We got a lot of this question, so they're ready to hear from you.
I appreciate the question. It's a great question. Fortunately, Michigan High School Athletic Association released some guidelines for high school sports just yesterday. We are expected to start on time. Football will start August 10th, and the rest of the fall sports will start on August 12th as of this moment. There are obviously some safety guidelines that will be put in place. Our indoor sports, swim and volleyball, will not be indoors as of yet. They will begin outdoors. So those are the regulations set forth by the Michigan High School Athletic Association. There are sport-specific guidelines for each sport that can be found on their website. If anyone wants to check those out, they can go to mhsaa.com and go to that specific sport, and it will give you all of those details for the sport-specific guidelines. As well as we will have more information on the athletic website that can be found at www.holtathletics.org. We will be probably at the beginning of next week be posting updated information regarding fall sports. Coaches are working on their return to learn or return to play plans over the weekend. They're going to be mapping out what their first week looks like. We will be meeting as a staff on Monday to make sure that we have everything that we need in place. And then we will put that information out on the athletic website. And so I recommend that all of our parents that are interested go to the athletic website, and you can sign up to be a fan. And if you become a fan of the website, anytime announcements are posted, you will receive either a text message or an email, your choice. It's a great tool. So I encourage everybody to become a fan of our athletic website.
That's great information. Thank you so much. Go Rams. All right, our next question is for Melissa Stewart. What will remote start look like for special education classrooms, specifically self-contained and ASD classrooms? We did have a few of these. I know this really refers more when we return, but let's see what you have to say.
Sure. Well, good evening. So as Steve and Dr. Hornak mentioned, we certainly look forward to providing a more robust learning experience for all students. And certainly students who receive special education support from our basic classrooms are among those that we are most concerned about. We understand that remote learning was not ideal for many of these students, and I'm in the process of working with staff to determine how we can best support this group of students as we move into the fall this year. We are considering providing some one-on-one or small group in-person instruction. I know that was requested by a lot of families. Staff and student safety has to remain a top priority. So I do anticipate keeping in-person time relatively short while students acclimate to the required PPE and safety procedures that we do have to implement if we move forward with providing some in-person instructional time. So what that looks like on a program by program basis, for example, students in our CI program may come in to meet with staff by appointment in person for as little as 15 minutes a week to start. I know that doesn't seem like much, but we do feel that it's necessary so that we have some time to teach students the procedures that they would need to follow as they enter the building. Again, all of the PPE and safety protocols that are required. And we would hope to be able to gradually increase some in-person time for those students that we're safely able to do that with while we remain in phase 4. Students in our CI programs would also have scheduled time virtually with their special education teacher, paras, and would be doing that again through Google Meets and other tools similarly to what we provided last year, just ramped up a little bit. Students in our EI program at the elementary level will also meet virtually with the EI, the special education teacher in that program. We are considering offering an in-person social skills group on a weekly basis for those students, in addition to the para support too. Students in our ASD programs would engage in the remote lessons provided by their general ed teachers, with additional regularly scheduled virtual support provided by the ASD teacher and paras. We know that these students often have difficulty working independently. And so with that in mind, students in the basic classrooms could receive up to 2 to 4 hours per day of virtual para support under the direction of their teachers. Paras may join in general ed classroom instruction or instruction provided by special ed staff. They may follow up with individual students as well to support with modified assignments. So we are just in the beginning planning stages of all of this. And I do want families to know that you will have the opportunity to engage in more detailed conversations with your case managers as we get closer to the start of the school year.
That's great. Thank you for the information. Our next question is going to go to Mr. Netzel. This is probably the most frequently asked question, and that is, will students be given a Chromebook again? And is it possible for a family with multiple students to check out a Chromebook for each learner?
Thank you, Ms. Lopez. And I was just asked this question on the sidewalk outside my house earlier today. So yes, so the answer is we are going to start putting together the plans for a distribution of Chromebooks. We purchased over 1,200 Chromebooks from the spring until a couple weeks ago. Those Chromebooks have been delivered, and we're delivering them to the appropriate buildings. Our hope and goal is that if students need a Chromebook, we have one for them, as well as if there are multiple students in the same household, that we're able to provide households multiple Chromebooks as well. Even though we made that large purchase in the spring, we will continue to evaluate the use of our CARES funds and other type of funds that come in to support during this COVID time to provide the technology that is needed. The conversation right now with the building principals is they're thinking through, what does this distribution look like? How do we effectively distribute them, but also provide some support to the students and parents using them? And so along with the Chromebook distribution comes a lot of conversation about what does back to school orientation look like for not only our students transferring from one building to another, but for our youngest students who have never been in the school system before, our kindergartners or TK students. So the answer is yes, we will be giving them out again. We have a lot more, and we hope that we can meet the needs of all of our families.
Great, thank you. Dr. Hornak, this is probably the second most, or maybe tied with the Chromebook question. When can we expect to receive the 2021 academic calendar?
Thank you, Mrs. Lopez. First of all, I'd just like to thank the over 400 community members who are participating tonight. Thank you so much for showing interest in Holt Public. We received 392 questions. Many are repetitive, okay? So many had basically asked almost the same question. This morning we went through approximately 30 to 35, and we're over 39 to 40 questions tonight, just depending on how things roll in terms of how we respond. To that end, while the first day of school can be decided by the Board of Education, and in our case, an agent of the board, which would be our admin team, the rest of the school calendar must be negotiated. I'm aware that the Holt Education Association is voting on the tentative agreement, which includes the calendar this weekend. As a result, I'm not able to speak to the specifics of the calendar, but rather overall generalities. As you know, our entire district will begin online or remotely on August 31st. Overall, we have fewer breaks in our school calendar this year, and that's in an effort to minimize the opportunity to travel and potentially bring back germs to our learning community. The official release of our school calendar could be ready as soon as August 10th, following our next Board of Education meeting.
Perfect, thank you. Our next question will go to Heather Crandall. Will childcare be offered by the district for parents who are working, and if so, will it be a full day?
Thank you, Christine. I want to thank everyone too. We've been asked this question a lot, and the parents have been very patient while we have worked through these times that are much different and things change rapidly. So as the board just recently voted to do online learning, we then were asked this question, had to kind of shift gears. So we've been working through that right now. Our programs are running full day currently for 6 weeks through 6th grade. We will continue at this time to offer full day childcare. We'll continue to run as long as the phases allow us to be open. What we're going to do is send out a survey to families that we did in the spring that were enrolled, because we surveyed families to say, what kind of care would you need? But things change all the time. So we're going to send that again to determine it. And what we're doing is we're following very small group sizes. So we have a very strict plan in place. So our capacity is going to be smaller in how many we can enroll, but we will continue to evaluate and enroll as we can. I would encourage anyone to follow, we're putting updates on Facebook. So our Facebook is our Holt Community Ed Facebook page. You can also call our office. So Sam and Judy are here to answer any questions that they can during the day, and then we'll go from there and answer the questions that we can.
Thank you so much. Okay, Dr. Hornick, this one comes to you. Are there alternatives for families who have determined that their children perform best in a face-to-face environment?
Thank you, Mrs. Lopez, again. We're still in the process of determining how best to support certain subgroups of students. You've heard Mr. Netzel and Mrs. Stewart talk about, how are we going to do business moving forward? And I want to especially speak to our special education or our special population groups. I'm hearing a number of families, however, in our communities are in the process of grouping similar age students into pods to serve as social and academic support teams. I'm tickled to hear that. It's really incredible the way our community comes together. We acknowledge that online learning is not the same as face-to-face instruction. If a child is unable to access our online delivery or paper packets, we will continue to partner with the individual families in these specific cases. We urge families to stay with Holt Public, as this experience, as mentioned several times, will be different than what you experienced in the spring. This will be a much more robust delivery and engagement system.
Thank you, Dr. Hornick. The next question we're going to send to Steve Netzel, and you may have touched on it, but we'll see if you have anything else to add. What will the required amount of time students will be expected to be online daily, and will it vary by grade level?
Sure, I did mention it before, but I will repeat it again and add a few thoughts to it, Ms. Lopez. So again, we have reached out to our neighboring districts and also looked at best practices, and we landed on some parameters, suggested parameters, and I'll repeat those again and then add a few comments. TK through second grade, 2 to 3 hours. Third through sixth grade, 3 to 4 hours. Seventh, eighth grade, 4 to 5 hours. And 9, 12, 5 hours. So some clarity with this time is this is not necessarily the student is in front of the computer this whole time. There is some other activities that they could be working independently on assignment, but there's more to it. Also with these hours, we understand that the flexibility that's going to be needed for the students. I assume that some students might need a little more time to help close the gap or remediate some of the learning of the skills that they need in order to meet their grade level content or their standards. So with that said, these are some parameters, but I also want to be very clear that we're asking all stakeholders to be flexible, but also, and I'm going to use the word rigor again, we have to push our students. We have to push them to the grade levels, the standards that they're expected to reach proficiency on. And for some students, it might require a little more time with a support staff member, a special ed teacher, or some type of extra itinerants within our building. So.
Great, thank you. The next question we're going to send back to Melissa Stewart. How will special education students be given the support they need to make continued growth toward their IEP goals and objectives?
Yeah. So last year, our primary focus was on students' overall well-being and then supporting students through that transition to online learning, which in many cases meant helping them with their general ed work, just how to access all of those tools and everything that was going on. And the feedback we got from a lot of families that was trying to schedule additional time to work on goals and objectives seemed very overwhelming. So our hope is that this fall, we'll have a lot of those basics down pat already so that we can return to providing specially designed instruction aligned to the goals and objectives in the students' IEPs. I am in the process still of working with staff to develop more detailed plans. I talked earlier about the basic classroom teachers, but that raising of the bar is the same for resource programs, students that have teacher consultant services, our school social workers, speech pathologists, school psychs, OT, PT, our teacher consultants for our deaf and hard of hearing students, our visually impaired students, and so on. So what I can tell you right now is that every staff member I talk to is very much looking forward to being able to safely work with students again. They know that these are challenging times for students and families, and they're really looking forward to helping students get back to reaching those goals. So just like a typical school day, if we were back to normal instructional practices, what that looks like is going to vary largely based on the type of program the student is in or what types of goal the student has. So individual or small group remote sessions will be held to provide specially designed instruction aligned to IEP goals, similar to what they would have had normally if we were meeting in person. Special ed teachers and many of the related services staff have access to the teachers' Google Classrooms. And so they are popping in and looking at the activities and helping to support with maybe the planning or how materials could be adapted to maximize students' ability to access the materials or engage in the learning. In some cases, special ed staff may join a Google Meet session that's being provided by a general ed teacher and then offer additional support to students in a separate small group or individualized setting. Also, paraeducators will be spending more time with students who would have had regular para support prior to the mandated closure. So all of this gives us more opportunity to focus in on those goals to assess student growth and progress. Again, we recognize that while some services may have worked well for some students virtually, it was very difficult for others. And as I said, we are exploring the possibility of doing some in-person individual or small group support for families that have students with disabilities and would like that option. We do have to ensure that can be done safely. Like I said before, families will have the opportunity to engage in more detailed planning with their case managers as we get closer to the start of the year.
That's great. Thank you for that information. Dr. Hornet, coming back to you again.
What? No, hang on.
Oh,
Is it?
I
Are you
know.
sure it's my turn?
Yes.
Okay.
You have a lot of questions.
Okay.
For students who are on free and reduced lunch, will they still have access to food?
Wonderful question. Yes, the answer is yes. While the federal government is still considering how to structure food service for this fall, especially for school districts that are choosing to start remotely, our food service director indicated that he's pulling together a task force to reflect on how we handled our food service distribution this past spring and summer and consider changes to improve our service moving forward. I would just like to remind everyone that food can currently be accessed on Mondays and Thursdays at one of our 4 remote distribution sites, and Tuesdays and Thursdays at the First Presbyterian Church in Holt, or at any time, day or night, at one of our 6, and I'm going to repeat, we now have 6 Little Free Pantries throughout our community. The Little Free Pantry is restocked daily. So the short answer is yes, we believe that food service will be available regardless of our academic delivery method. But I'd urge everyone to stay tuned and check back with us on that particular question, as this remains an extremely fluid situation.
Thank you. All right, this next question is for Mr. Netzel. And we did have a lot of families who reached out that are in this position, and there was a lot of passion behind the questions, I can tell you. And that is, there were multiple questions from families who are working during the day and concerned about how their children, especially younger learners, who will need childcare, will be able to receive their instruction and the impact it will have on their families. Will there be taped instruction that can be accessed later? And also, please share some thoughts about remote learning as it relates to these working families. Thank you.
Great question. And so this has been a big a topic of discussion that we've had with multiple stakeholder groups. I can quickly recall many comments last night from our community task force that brought up the need to make sure that we are engaging our students in multiple ways. Also earlier, I believe I mentioned pieces about the weekly schedule and our classroom teachers being flexible in understanding their learning community and what a day looks like. And so we have learned from the spring. I can think of one teacher that said that the most engagement he got was at 5 o'clock at night or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And so he took that as where the students were and was flexible around their needs. As far as the specific question about taped instruction, yes, as a district, the board has adopted Google Classroom as our learning management system. Currently, we're investigating an add-on piece where staff can tape their Google, through their Google Meets, they can tape the lessons. We have discussed at the high school level how they can use the Ziggies to tape, and it is an expectation that teachers not only provide live instruction, are flexible with students and family schedules, but also that recorded lessons need to be posted to Google Classroom on a weekly basis as well. And as I mentioned earlier, in the weekly schedule that will be posted every Monday morning, students and families will know what lessons are recorded and what's coming at them for the next five learning days.
That's great. Thank you so much. The next question we're going to send to Renee Sadler. What advice and or considerations would you give to a college-bound athlete who is seeking out scholarship opportunities?
Christine, that's a great question, one I get asked a lot. And really, I have a three-step approach to this that I communicate with our student athletes. First, they should speak with their coaches. We are lucky to have several of our varsity coaches that participated at the college level, so they've been through the process. So they have lots of advice to give, as well as our coaches are in communication with college coaches around our area quite frequently. So first and foremost, make sure you're communicating with your coach. They've got some great advice. Second, I would say to make sure that you communicate with your guidance counselor, to make sure that your academics are in line with the level that you are desiring to play. If you're trying to play at the Division I level, there are certain classes that you must take. So it's real important that you communicate with your counselors so that they can make sure that your academics are where they need to be. And then lastly, I can refer all of our student athletes to our holtathletics.org website. Under the Forms and Links tab, there is a link to the ncaa.org website, and that has a whole bunch of information and resources for our student athletes to access. It also is where our student athletes will need to go to create an account on the NCAA Eligibility Center. All NCAA athletes must create an account, and that is done through that website, and there's a step-by-step process also on that website. So those are the three things that I always recommend to our student athletes and to parents that ask. And then, you know, I always encourage our student athletes to become more involved in just athletics. When I communicate with college coaches and they want to ask me about a particular student athlete, I can tell you that one of the first questions I get from a college coach is not what skills they have or what their you know, what their statistics are. They want to know what grades the students get, and then they want to know what else are they active in. So they're looking for that well-rounded student athlete. So if for all our students out there, you know, be involved in your community will be a real big asset for you.
Great advice. Thank you. We're going to go back to Melissa Stewart for this one. How will accommodations be met for special education students? For example, can PowerPoint materials come with audio options for struggling readers?
So that is a great question. With the short notice that we had last year that we were moving to this remote platform, it was really quite impossible to provide all of the training that we would have liked to, specific to use of accommodations. So this is definitely a big area of focus for me as we move into the fall. Staff will have access to training that will be provided by Ingham ISD. We've also used some of the federal CARES grant money to contract with someone who has a background as a special education teacher and also teaches a course at MSU on the use of assistive technology in the classroom. So I'm really excited to be bringing this person on staff, and they will be available to help with ongoing training and support to staff in this area as we get going. I fully admit this is a huge undertaking. Staff are working hard to redesign so much of what we do for our kids, and we do still have quite a learning curve in front of us. But we're really excited because we know at the end of this, we're going to be stronger and that this will result in something better for all kids moving forward. I have to just say really quick that I really appreciate the patience and support that we've received from families while we learn and grow in this area in particular. I do encourage parents to stay in contact with case managers throughout the entire year. We want to make sure that case managers know if there are materials that students are struggling with at home so that we can jump in and support if we need to do something differently with accommodating certain types of materials in a way that maybe we just hadn't thought of previously. So on one other side note, I also want to let families know that there is a training available on the Ingham ISD website. There's some information, as well as the Michigan Alliance for Families website about some upcoming online learning opportunities to help families with supporting their students at home. So I would encourage you to look at that as well. Thanks.
That's great information. Thank you. Dr. Hornick, back to you. What did you and the board consider when deciding to start the year with remote learning?
Hey, thank you. The safety of our student, staff, and learning community continues to be a priority for us. At the time of our board meeting on Monday, we analyzed the criteria established by the Department of Health and Human Services. And at the time, our region was transitioning out of a high-risk level to a medium high-risk level. We also analyzed the governor's criteria and the current phase assigned to our region, as well as the Ingham County Health Department dashboard. Now, if you've not been on the Ingham County Health Department dashboard, you should check it out. You can drill down to certain zip codes, and you can find out actually which particular zip codes are seeing an increase or a decrease. We also checked out the Eaton-Berry Health Department website because we do have a school in Eaton County to help us influence our recommendation and support the move to a remote start. So this was a decision that was really difficult to make. It was a recommendation that originated from administration based on the safety of our student, staff, and learning community, based on the data that we could find at those 4 different sources and sites.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Netzel, how will seniors get the help they need to plan for their future? How will they get resources to help them with college applications, scholarships, FAFSA, etc.?
So we are really fortunate as a district to have a partnership with the MSU College Advising Corps, and we're proud to have a full-time college advisor at the high school. Jana Limbo is our college advisor for the upcoming school year. She offers support to students and families in all aspects of the college-going process. She has a Google Classroom and engages with students and families through many different modes of communication and meeting opportunities. She will reach out to all senior students and families when school begins in the fall.
That's great. And as someone who came from the North Campus, seniors, you are very, very fortunate to have Miss Limbo and also Miss Schaaf. So please take advantage of the 2 of those ladies. They can be invaluable to you as you navigate senior year, and they're always available. Okay, our next question, Heather Crandall. How does the remote learning model impact tuition-based preschool at Midway? Is preschool also under the same requirements?
Sure. So currently we are waiting for guidance from the Michigan Department of Education around preschool. As of today, we're currently planning to align our preschoolers with the district's remote learning plan. And we're creating an online learning platform for all of our young learners. You know, there's great benefit to children getting the preschool experience. We're working very hard to create what an online program is for those programs that meet the needs of our families and our students. It will be formatted very differently than what it was in the spring. So similar to the K-12 world, we are looking at doing it much differently than how it was done previously. We offer a wide range of different preschool programs at Midway. So if there's someone that's not enrolled that would like more information, the ISD has a website. It's called inghampreschool.org. And a family that's interested could fill out an interest form, and then it gets routed to us here at Midway. And then our office would contact families and answer any other questions that they have around preschool. If there's a family that's currently enrolled that still has questions, they can call our office at any point and we're happy to answer them.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Dr. Hornak, back to you. Can we look at partnering with the Holt Delhi Capital Area District Library to have a school-wide reading challenge to push reading goals?
I feel like you're coming back to me a little quicker than others, but yes. So the answer is yes. The Holt Delhi Library is ready to serve. In fact, our latest podcast, which was our 197th consecutive weekly podcast, was posted on Tuesday, and it was focused on how the library can support and help mitigate the losses that may have occurred over the summer. Part of the on-air and off-air discussion included how to partner moving forward to ensure our students' academic needs are being met, and more specifically, it was surrounding how to create book boxes or book bags with particular reading material that relates to the levels being used in our schools. In other words, there are times where access to books at home is difficult, especially in the right reading level or right reading band of someone's abilities. The library is very interested in creating those book bags or book boxes to share with members of our learning community. We have several additional ideas that we're investigating, including expanding the relationship with, for instance, Midway Early Learning Center and our child care programs, as well as other local child care programs in the area, and being that conduit between the child care programs and the public library. So good things to come with the Holt Delhi Library moving forward.
That's exciting. Thank you so much for the information. Next, back to Steve Netzel. Again, about seniors here. Will seniors still be able to make up the SAT they missed due to the COVID shutdown in the spring?
So we are currently following the MDE guidelines surrounding makeup testing for the spring. At this time, we are planning to offer the SAT in the fall at the high school for current senior students. There's a little bit of uncertainty since we have moved to remote, but we will follow up and see what our next steps need to be. Holt Public Schools and the high school are following guidance from the MDE, the College Board, and health guidelines. The high school will be communicating with senior students and families as soon as we have more information. If a student would prefer, they can sign up for a Saturday SAT offering through the College Board website. A Saturday SAT test would need to be paid by the student. So more to come, but we are definitely considering providing as many opportunities as possible.
Sounds great. Thank you. Back to you, Dr. Hornak. And yes, there are a lot of questions for you
All right.
today, and Mr. Netzel. So let's see. Do you have thoughts on the damage that the current environment is having on the social, emotional, and mental health of our students and staff during this very challenging time?
Mrs. Lopez, I'm happy to report we're up to 460 viewers, and this particular question is something that I'm preoccupied about. As a son of a licensed psychologist, a lesson my mother shared with me drives my work. She has implored on me that I approach everything with an empathetic mindset. Most of the time, we're unaware of the stress another person is carrying with them. By attempting to understand the feelings of another person, we may be able to avoid misunderstandings or harmful or hurtful comments. I worry about a number of things. Do our students have enough food? We continue, as you've heard, to deploy our remote food bus twice a week. We've coordinated that food pickup twice a week at the First Presbyterian Church on Tuesdays and Thursdays during the lunch hour. And we have helped to install those 6 little free pantries across our learning community. Day or night, access to food is available. Unfortunately, not all households are functional and have some of the basics. We have a very large homeless population in Holt Public. Over 150 students are considered homeless. Now, that does not mean that they do not have a roof over their heads when it's time to go to sleep, but it does mean that they might be living with a relative or they might be living with a friend and they don't have a permanent address attached to them. I continue to worry about the well-being of our learning community, especially in the absence of the opportunity to reach out and physically support one another. As you've heard me say, in a typical year, we will be able to support one another in person, in our classrooms, in our schools, and in our learning community. Unfortunately, due to the need to social distance, we're unable to be together. This is hard on all of us. It includes our staff, it includes our families, and honest to goodness, this is really, really difficult. To that end, we hope to access some of the mental health supports available to all of our stakeholders moving forward. In fact, a couple of years ago, we convened a crisis team to support our students and staff. We are also accessing the work of the regional committee completed this summer regarding the social emotional supports. In addition, there are 3 mental health resources I would like to share with you today. Headspace for Michiganders. Headspace is a science-backed meditation app that helps reduce stress, move more, and sleep more soundly. That can be located at headspace.com/mi. The second resource I'd like to share is called michigan.gov:"Stay home, stay well." Michigan.gov is providing a variety of emotional and mental supports resources that you can use without leaving your home, which include videos, guides, and text lines for those who are seeking help. To access these resources, please visit michigan.gov/staywell. And the final resource I'd like to share regarding this particular question, if you're feeling emotional distress or your child is feeling emotional distress, a confidential emotional support counseling service is available 24/7 at no cost to Michigan residents. The counselor on the other end of the line has received specialized training from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration's Disaster Technical Assistance Center. To access the hotline, I urge everyone to call 1-888-535-6136 and press 8.
That's terrific. And I'd like to add to that. I did it earlier too, but I'm such a believer in this app. There's an app called the Calm app, CALM, and it is amazing. I have given or told more students about the Calm app than probably any other app. And now is a really good time if you don't have that and you're experiencing anxiety or stress, or you need help with falling asleep, or your mind can't turn off. The Calm app has a lot of great free resources. So just wanted to throw that in there as someone who cares about that as well. Okay, our next question, now back to Mr. Netzel. Will high school students be able to adjust their schedules to select classes more suited to remote learning?
So there's a couple pieces I'd like to share with this, Ms. Lopez. The first one is that we will be providing professional development time for our staff before the school year launches, with one of the tasks is having all teachers working to make their course more conducive to remote learning. We need to look at how our delivery model, our assessment, our instruction, all those different components, and we need to think long and hard about how we need to adjust, knowing that we have students not in the classroom with us. As far as the schedules will be released August 20th. There is an electronic form that can be completed and submitted for a change. but I do want to make note that there are, with changes in schedules, they're subject to class sizes, graduation requirements, and wait list numbers. So again, August 20th, and there will be a process you can follow seeking a change. Also, when talking to Mr. Willard a little bit, he encouraged if there's individual questions and there's students that know their assigned counselor to reach out to their counselor through an email as well to get some individual questions they might have answered. So again, August 20th is the most recent date that I have heard.
That sounds great. Thank you. Dr. Hornak, are there plans to promote a sense of community and positive feelings for the students and staff during the remote learning phase?
The answer is yes. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, we assembled a community task force of approximately 65 members of our learning community. As we were ending our most recent meeting, actually yesterday, several members of the task force highlighted the deep appreciation for the work that has occurred this summer and will occur in August leading up to our first day of school. Much of that work is invisible to our public. In addition, we plan to showcase the positive on social media, as well as create videos to share on our YouTube channel. While it's not ideal to reopen remotely, and we are best when we are face-to-face and alongside our students, we need to make best of this situation by promoting the positive over and over and over.
Absolutely. And you do that better than anybody.
Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, Mr. Netzel, coming right back to you.
Okay.
What if a family is unable or refuses to participate in remote learning?
All right. Two different pieces to that, unable and refuses. So the first one is I'm going to reference refuses as not engaging. So if a student is not engaging, I think we're follow a very similar process we did in the spring as we do in the brick and mortar. And our first concern would be, is that child okay? So if that child is not accessing Google Classroom, the teacher is not able to connect with them, the social and emotional well-being of that child is the #1 priority. And I know from the experience in the spring, we deployed all type of people to go check on that student to make sure they were okay. And I do want to remind our community, and I reminded our staff earlier today, that we all are mandated reporters, whether as a staff member or a support staff member, whether we're face-to-face or remote. With that said, we need to find out what are the barriers of why a student is not engaging and why are they not connecting with their teacher, whether it's in all their different classes or they're in the elementary, they're one classroom. If the barrier is a technology piece, we need to work through it. That is where we will start. The second piece, if they are unable, because we have processed through the barriers, we have offered different supports, and they're still not able to, unable to participate, we would move into a paper packet process. Again, we're doing everything we can to get our students online. We believe that is the most efficient and effective way for teachers to engage with students with feedback. But again, we know that's not going to be for all of our students. And I kind of want to add on to what Ms. Stewart has mentioned before and Dr. Hornak is, you know, as we move through this process and get closer, you know, we talk about special populations, and that means a lot of different groups, including our AP students at the high school. But what I want to say is that this would be a group that we might consider bringing in face-to-face for some one-on-one instruction or small group instruction, just to assure that we're able to gauge where they're at with their learning, and we can provide them updated packets as they continue to grow and learn through this process. So.
A lot of great information. Thank you. Dr. Hornak, is it possible to have some outdoor distance orientations or meet and greets to help set the foundation of relationships between students, staff, and families?
Thank you, Mrs. Lopez. Well, we like the idea of social distance orientations or meet the teacher events. To that end, we're still investigating the safest and most practical way of supporting this idea. We have to keep in mind that there are a variety of factors that have influenced our decision to start the year online or remotely, including the fact that some of our educators may have family members who are health compromised, and meeting groups of people at an orientation or a meet and greet could jeopardize the safety of a family member at home. In the end, this is a very good idea and it's still being considered. And this will be a focus of our work as early as next week when we get back together. So stay tuned on that one, but we like the idea, and if possible, we're going to try to move forward with it.
Sounds great. Mr. Netzel, will there be access to tutors and or study hall groups for students who need additional supports?
So I believe this kind of ties into some of the other comments that were made by either Ms. Stewart, myself, or Dr. Hornak, but we are again in the process of what does it look like to bring small groups in. We have made the decision as a district to go remote to protect the safety and health of our students, staff, and everybody that's involved. And so we need to walk very slow with this process and be very careful about the access and the interaction between our staff and students and following the guidelines laid out by the governor. We are aware that this is a setting or environment that would be really beneficial to a lot of kids. But again, we are at the beginning process of this, and as we know more and opportunities arise and we crystallize some of these things, we will share with our community. I would say that the main liaison to find out about this information besides the website would be that communication that happens with the classroom teacher through Google Classroom. So.
Sounds good. Dr. Hornak, is it true that our parents must sign a death waiver for their children to attend Holt Public Schools this year when we return to face-to-face?
Well, in response to this question, we're currently working with our insurance carrier to determine if waivers are needed when members of our learning community choose to voluntarily enter our facilities. As it sits today, for the bulk of our students, a waiver would not be necessary due to our remote start for the school year. And I understand that across the nation, you're seeing waivers that say, death in it. I certainly hope we're not going to be in that situation here. But again, we are still working with our insurance carrier to determine if waivers are needed beyond what we currently have, which would be probably for athletics and some other special events.
Thank you. Mr. Netzel, what type of accountability will there be for both teachers and students? Many parents expressed concern that some teachers were very engaged and others were not engaged at all. They expressed the same concerns for the students and are concerned about them falling behind.
A great question. I will first be very open and transparent and start with this is not the spring. And we talked about that as it started. And I want to thank the community for giving grace with understanding the quick transition we need to make. But every stakeholder I have talked to has acknowledged that we need to do it better. We need to meet the needs of our students in all the different ways. And so I want to first acknowledge that concern, and I appreciate the transparency of asking that question. For some of the expectations for the staff, I kind of outlined at the beginning of this, one of the earlier questions, but some of the guidelines that are set forth for our staff around the expected curriculum, instruction, assessment, and grading. We talked a little bit about the 7-hour workday. We talked about one disadvantage that our staff had in the spring is they were not able to access their classroom. And so a lot of the needed materials, the technology, they were not able to access, that now they will have access. I think one of the key components to making this experience better for our students and providing and supporting our staff is the extensive professional development. We have front-loaded a lot of hours before the first day of school to assure that they're getting what they need. And in addition, throughout the year, they'll continue to get some professional development. We talked about a little bit about the accountability, the weekly schedules. You know, I know as a parent, if I do not see a schedule on Monday morning, I will be emailing the teacher to ask where that schedule is. That is the driver that helps our families pace out their week, knowing that there could be all different scenarios at home and what's going on. So it is so essential that we have that information. As again, a couple other things I talked about are the recorded lessons and the live lessons. You know, that will be really important, along with the expectation of sharing with students where they're at in their journey to meeting the standards. As for the students, I don't know how many are on here, but all I can say is it is not the spring. Again, I have mentioned I have 8th grade son and soon to be sophomore daughter, and then I'm saying to them, it is not the spring. We have to start right from the beginning, and we really need the support of our parents. We need consistency from our teachers. It's essential that we have very clear communication regarding the expectations. Part of this communication is the need for structure. I believe a lot of our students need the structure. They need consistency. We are continuously talking about how we use our support staff to meet the needs of our students, the counselors, MTSS coordinators, the deans, the academic interventionists. How do we use those support staff? And I probably missed some, to reach out and connect with our students as well. I will, again, we do not want any of our students to fall behind or continue to fall behind. And this is a huge priority for our staff and our task force that are working to make this the most robust experience as possible.
Great, thank you. Dr. Hornak, do you know if the Wilson Talent Center will be providing programming this year?
Thank you, Mrs. Lopez. I can tell you with confidence that I did talk with the Superintendent Melema, this morning regarding the Wilson Talent Center. And as of today, there are plans to reopen the Wilson Talent Center accordingly. As you can imagine, it will be very difficult to operate virtual programs that are held at the Wilson Talent Center, such as welding and some other specialized programs. As a result, he again said, yes, as of today, they plan to reopen. However, he also cautioned and said, this is such a fluid situation. Please stay tuned on this one. So if you have a family member who will be attending the Wilson Talent Center, or students that are on this call, if you're planning to attend the Wilson Talent Center this fall, as of today, you're going to be back in session. But please, please, please check back with us on this one.
That sounds good, thank you. Mr. Netzel, for families that do not have internet access, does Holt Public have some resources that are available to make sure that all students will have access to remote learning?
I think, Ms. Lopez, you need to count the number of questions that I'm receiving.
Okay, if I'm being honest,
All right.
Netzel, you have one more question than Dr. Hornak. I'm being honest. You have one more, you do, yep.
So our ultimate goal, and Kevin is on this, our tech director, our ultimate goal is to provide all students the opportunity to access online learning during this time. We have set forth the task of looking into hotspots and getting an idea of, are they available? How much do they cost? That is one pathway we're taking. We've talked about mobile access. We've talked about a bus moving through or parking somewhere in our community and letting our families know where this is so they can access the internet and maybe download what they need for that day. We've also talked about outside access points, looking at some condensed areas or where our students are and putting out an access point where they can connect to our network. So those are some of the things that we are currently working on, as well as we talked about opening up the buildings. We talked about that multiple times, and that would be an access point for some students that are in need. Again, this is a priority. From my experience in the spring and getting feedback, paper packets are really, really difficult. And again, we understand This is the only option for some families, and I will honor that. But also, we need to knock down every barrier possible to try to get them online.
For sure. Thank you. Dr. Hornak, how do you anticipate meeting the state academic standards in education for students this year?
Thank you for that question. Very thoughtful question. And thanks to the members of our public. Again, we are well over 450 people watching this webinar tonight. Regardless of the delivery model, Holt Public Schools will teach the standards at each grade level. A remote delivery and instruction will be different this fall. You've heard us commit to that time after time. Whenever we're able to, we're trying to emphasize the fact that this will be an improved delivery system. The expectations are more rigorous. Our staff will be receiving more training. As Steve just mentioned, the month of August is dedicated in preparing for our August 31st launch. Our staff will work to engage with students and families to a greater extent than may have occurred this past spring. Again, we were thrust into doing online learning, and we are best when we are in front of and alongside our students. We are aware the stakes are high, and I'm going to tell you, we are up for the challenge.
Thank you. Yes, we are. All right, Mr. Netzel, is there a plan for students that will be brand new to a building to somehow visit the building, meet their teachers, principals, staff members? And that's really, we received this whether they were entering high school or a new building, the middle school, junior high, but families, particularly of kindergartners, we received a lot of kindergarten families really concerned. So if you could address that for those families, that'd be great.
Yep, absolutely, and I believe I touched on it here and there through other questions, but you know, I think this is a huge priority, and we're putting together our agenda for our conversation with our principals on Monday. And this is one of the main topics that we are going to discuss of what this looks like. You know, we like the idea of social distance orientations. We have some amazing programs, especially 712 with mentorships. And I know from our community meeting yesterday, one of the leaders of that group really wants to work to put something together to help get students in. And to that end, we are still investigating the safest, most practical way to do this. We have to keep in mind there are a variety of factors that impact these decisions. Some of our staff might have family members that are immune compromised, and we need to make sure we're not jeopardizing the safety of our staff as well as our students. This is a huge priority. I am very, very concerned about the experience of a 4- and 5-year-old entering into our system, not knowing their teacher, not ever seeing them in person. I'm very concerned about our students transitioning to the high school for the first time, and the change in the expectations with grades. There's just a grave concern with all this that I think this is one of our #1 priorities over the next week to lay out and figure out how do we do this the safest way, but also knowing that this is a high need for a large group of our population.
Great, thank you. Dr. Hornak, next question, of course, for you. And I must say that I'm not surprised by this question, and we had it a number of times. What kind of support do the schools need from our families to get off to a successful start?
Well, first of all, it just tickles me to read a question like that, or hear you read it, I should say. You know, I just feel very fortunate to live and work in this learning community. The amount of support we receive is just incredible. I absolutely love this question. I hope that our public is empathetic to these unprecedented circumstances that we find ourselves in at the moment. I'm not asking for expectations to be lowered, but rather grace to work through issues with us. I desire a growth mindset from our public. There may be a need for donations similar to what we asked for in the spring, such as elastic overhead projector film, etc., while we were making face shield frames for our first responder heroes. In fact, likely this weekend, and if not this weekend, maybe next weekend, we will be conducting a school supply drive. It is our hope that in coordination with our family, we will be issuing Chromebooks and school supplies to students when at the same time we're issuing those Chromebooks. Again, when we return to school, whenever that may be, we will not be afforded the opportunity to share school supplies as we once did. So the need for school supplies will be going up. Keep an eye on the peak at the week for more on that. Families can also help their children understand the proper techniques to wear a mask and monitor proper hand washing techniques, which includes washing hands with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Okay, an easy way to do that is to sing the happy birthday song a couple times or the ABCs. In the end, our greatest need may be the true partnership between home and school to ensure the needs of the students we serve are being met. Absolutely love that question. Thank you.
I do too. And you know, working in your office, as you well know, every week, without fail, since we shut down, every week we receive envelopes with donation. I had a new business member come into our office today with a $500 check. He owns the new State Farm. His name is David, and I don't remember his last name, at the State Farm on Cedar, and he walked into our office with a $500 check for supplies for teachers and classrooms. So we see that all the time. So we're really grateful for all of our community members for keeping us going. Next question, Mr. Netzel, will there be a transitional kindergarten program this year?
I have a smile on my face because my emails are popping up, and I had a parent of a former Elliott student I had as a principal and said, can you repeat that expectation piece for our students again? And I will bring him back over to the meeting. So if you saw a little grin, that is, I don't know who can see, but I had to chuckle with that. And so hopefully you're listening out there. So TK, absolutely, we are having TK this year. I will be working with building principals over the next week and working through what this will look like. The idea of the reasons or the data points that we use to qualify a student for TK will not change. What will change is how do we collect that information from these students. And so I wish I had a clear plan, but I don't. I know what the criteria is, and the criteria will be the foundation of our decision. But I will say, because we get this question a ton in enrollment, is that when you enroll your kindergarten student, you enroll them for kindergarten, and through a process, you will be contacted by the building principal and or a kindergarten teacher to talk about the possibility of TK. So again, we're gonna have it. We're gonna have to be flexible with our process, and it will be a program that we offer in our buildings.
Perfect. Dr. Hornak, can teacher expectations be made available to students? It would be helpful to know how much contact the teachers are expected to have with their students. And I know Mr. Netzel has touched on it, but I think having us touch on it again is probably good.
You bet. We can, again, over and over, just emphasize the fact that in coordination with the Holt Education Association, we have determined that our educators will be engaged 7 hours a day. To that end, it's a flexible 7 hours. So Steve has mentioned that for some, they'll actually identify the best time of day for their students. Okay, so for some it might be after dinner. For others it might be first thing in the morning. There is a residency expectation as well. Our teachers may be teaching from their teaching spaces, and they will be coming to their schools at least once a week. Okay, to that end, we also have some suggested average daily times. For transitional kindergarten to second grade, 2 to 3 hours, and that includes engaging with their primary classroom teacher, could be electives and specialist teachers such as kinetics and art. And then it kind of scales up from there based on age and grade. So to that end, those expectations will be laid out more specifically by the classroom teacher and or the administrator of the building, but that will be widely known. And as Mr. Netzel had mentioned, Monday morning, I believe, of each week, there will be a weekly plan laid out for learning so that families can plan their week ahead. So great question.
That is a good question. Thanks for the answer. And parents, I would say, again, as a building secretary, before moving to Dr. Hornak, if ever you're concerned about the lack of contact your building principal. They will jump right on that, I promise you. Okay, Mr. Netzel, what are the district's expectations as it pertains to remote learning at different developmental ages and across the curriculum? Will grade levels all use the same programs and platforms?
So I'll add a little bit. So I'll start with the platform. So I think it was the board meeting in June, there's a presentation around the adoption of Google Classroom as a learning management system, and the board approved and accepted it. And so all of our teachers will be using Google Classroom TK through 12th grade 13. There's lots of reasons for this, and one was the consistency with our families and building capacity with our students as they move through our system. So again, the platform will be Google Classroom. That does not mean that teachers can't link other information within their classroom, but that will be the main system for communication, uploading of assignments, feedback, those type of pieces. In addition, as far as programming, we have adopted programs at different levels. We have Go Math, Reading Street, Amplify. These are materials. Yes, they're adopted curriculum, but really what drives our instruction is our standards. And so all grade levels, all content will have identified priority targets. One thing that we know that is going to be a little different, and we are aware of this, is it might be a little bit different, or might be a little more difficult to get through as many standards as we might with face-to-face. And at the same time, there's a lot of people in the educational research that's saying maybe it's time for us to narrow it a little bit and go a little deeper with the ones that are the most priority. So there are priority targets. There's a clear scope and sequence. In addition, staff over the last couple of years have been working on their grade level scales to help inform their next instructional move. For example, if a classroom teacher is working on their lesson plans, they will start with their adopted programs. 7-12, they work backwards by design. They start with the standard and they build their lessons from there. So I think that kind of answers Dr. Hornak, and I know I mentioned before, talked about the time that students will be asked to engage. And I believe that I touched on the programs and the platform. So
Sounds good. We're down to about 8 minutes, Dr. Hornak. We've got 2 questions left, so hopefully we can get through them.
I think we can.
I think so. How will students obtain the social, emotional connections they need since they have been away from their friends, classmates, and teachers since mid-March and are now beginning the new school year with remote learning?
Wonderful question. So we have innovative faculty and staff, and there are many innovative ways to build community online, such as through an online scavenger hunt or get to know you games, like a memory game with, online, what have you. And or through other social distanced activities. Now, I'm particularly speaking to online get to know yous. But with that, I want to share that our staff is ready for this challenge. They're extremely talented, and they will find ways to ensure that students in their classrooms are connecting with one another. And if a child is struggling to engage, we will go to the end to connect with their family to ensure that we remove the barriers to make sure that they have the opportunity to engage at the deepest level that they possibly can. You had heard me comment earlier on the question that was relating to the social, emotional, and mental health of our students and staff during this challenging time. We have an crisis intervention team of professionals who are also ready and on standby to support when needed. And that whole piece that my mom actually implored on me, which is that empathetic mindset. I hope that, again, our public continues to enter each situation attempting to understand the feelings of another. But specific to this question, I am really excited to see the innovative ways our educators build community online. And unfortunately, that's what they're going to have to do, but the best is yet to come.
Sounds great. And our last question, and really you have touched on this a couple of times, but this is a good opportunity for the students who may be left on. Will there be more accountability for student attendance and participation in distance learning than there was in the spring?
Yes, there will be. So what I want to add to that is a couple, I'm going to extend a little bit is, you know, just because we are in remote learning, we will still follow the truancy protocols. I know that K-12, we have a process in place where reaching out, supporting letters. And so for the start of the fall, we will be following that referral process. And I share that not as a threat, but more of this part of our job when students are enrolled in Holt Public, that they are attending and engaging in instruction. With that, just because students are attending does not always mean they're engaging, right? And I can tell you from our community task force meeting, that is one of the pieces that a lot of the classroom teachers are seeking support on. How do we increase the engagement of our students? And I know through the ISD and other sources of reaching out to what are some good webinars, what are some good online training that we can provide our staff to help increase engagement. So the question also is, you know, how often will students' attendance be taken? Is, you know, right now we're working with pupil accounting at our level, at the ISD level, working with our auditors, and along with a lot of the bills that are out there floating around about what this attendance will look like. So we are following along, but we also know that that we need our students to participate, and our staff are willing to go the extra mile to get them engaged. So.
Sounds great. That's all I have.
We're doing great on time. In closing, I'd like to thank our panel. Tonight you heard from Special Education Director Melissa Stewart, Community Education and Midway Early Learning Center Principal Heather Crandall. You didn't hear a whole lot from Director of HR and Talent Management Peter Tresice. He was more active this morning, but he is on this particular panel. Executive Director of Curriculum and Staff Development Steve Netzel, Athletic Director Renee Sadler, and myself. I'd also like to pay a special thank you to the tech team behind the scene. It's actually Kevin Gelbreth. He is our tech director, and as well as our moderator, the amazing Christine Lopez. We hope you found this town hall to be helpful. There's nothing easy about this work. This is hard, and it remains such a fluid situation. With confidence, I can tell you that those who've been working on the remote guidelines and our return to learn plan have one goal in mind. It is to prepare an understandable document that will ensure that teaching and learning can and will occur at the greatest level possible. I have extreme empathy for the work I see on a daily basis, and I'd like to pay the highest compliment to all of the stakeholders who have worked tirelessly to help prepare for the 2021 school year. There's no place I'd rather be than here, serving you and our learning community. The work that I see on a daily basis continues to be impressive. At this point, Kevin, will you release the poll? Thanks again for joining us, everyone.